Unreal Engine is absolutely incredible, allowing you to make insanely good graphics with minimal effort. On the other hand, Unreal Engine is kind of famous for its steep learning curve that looks something like a brick wall. Even simply installing it might force you to reconsider your life choices. So in this video, I'll show you how to set up Unreal Engine as fast as possible. Notice that I said to set up, not just install, because many other videos lead up to launching the engine and call it a day. But I declare that useless, as it can be explained in under 60 seconds. I want you to have a complete environment ready to use, which is why I'll also cover integrating IDEs, using the versioning system, and other topics. Of course, I'll start with actually installing the beast, but you're free to skip this part. Another thing to mention is that I'll be primarily focusing on Linux, as I simply don't have a Windows or Mac laptop, but it's identical for other systems, so that doesn't really matter. Now, you can install Unreal Engine either by downloading the installer on Windows or compiling the engine yourself, which works on any system. If you're not going to be using C++, then I'd recommend sticking with the installer, but in case you need C++ or just hate Windows, then you must build the engine from source, but that's actually a lot simpler than it sounds. First, you need to get the actual source code, which requires registering on Epic Games' website, linking your GitHub, and finally receiving an invite email to get access to the repository. Once complete, you can download the source code and then build it using the instructions for either Windows, Linux, or Mac. If you're running Linux, you can view the aforementioned short and also check the description for a fix if you're getting invalid command line error when trying to launch the engine. I should also mention that downloading and building Unreal takes unreal amount of time on most systems and requires like 200 gigabytes of disk space, so be prepared for that. Unreal Engine does not require you to know C++. You can just open the engine and do all the logic using blueprints, which are a visual programming thingamajig that's great for beginners or just prototyping. However, they're not a silver bullet, and C++ has its own advantages, like better performance, better versioning support, and is a must for any serious project. Which to use is obviously up to you, but the correct answer would be both, as mixing them allows you to get the best from each one of them while avoiding the drawbacks. To work with C++, you will need a code editor, and you have the following options. The most popular choice is Visual Studio, but that's only for Windows people. That being said, most of you are using Windows, and honestly it's almost always the best choice. Mac and Linux users, however, simply don't have that option, and most commonly resort to using Visual Studio Code. And while this is definitely a viable option, I'd also like to point out the Writer IDE from JetBrains, as unlike VS Code, it's an actual IDE, not a notebook on steroids, which just means that it'll give you more functionality and better support. It is not free though, so pick what you will. If you choose to use only the blueprints, then you can just go ahead and launch the engine. But if you want to use C++, you will need to launch the Unreal Engine from within your code editor. I'll be showing how to do it with Writer, but it's almost identical on other editors. To start, you will need to make a new C++ project and then open it in your IDE of choice. By the way, even though we are creating a C++ project, you will still be able to use blueprints as much as you want. At this point, I should also mention that all code editors have slightly different setups and thus different issues that you can run into. This is further complicated by different operating systems, so it's impossible for me to cover everything in a single video. For this reason, I will just give a generalist overview, but you can check out the description for solutions to the most common problems. And you can also request me to do a more detailed video about a specific IDE if you're having issues. With that out of our way, we can just build and launch the Unreal Engine editor from within our IDE. From here, you can set your IDE in project settings and create your first C++ files or blueprints. Congratulations, you can now start making your game. So you've been working on your game, but at some point something went wrong. You now have a bug and you have no idea when it appeared or how to fix it. If only you could go back in time to find out when exactly this bug appeared. Oh wait, you can do that, and it's called versioning systems. These are a must-have for developing a project in a team, but they can also come in handy when you're working alone, as they can help you to track changes to your game, thus helping to find out what exactly caused a bug. But how do you actually use it? Well, all you need to do is to create a Git repository in your project folder. This can be done either by using your terminal or any graphical application like Git Kraken. But your project folder also contains many temporary files like build artifacts or logs, so you should make a git ignore file with gitignore.io to keep those files and folders from indexing. All this was similar to any other project and allows us to track changes in C++ from our code editors. But how can we inspect our blueprints? If your answer would be to just view them as text files, you'd be wrong, as Unreal Engine actually has Git support right in it. You can access it with this menu over here, and then you can view all your changes to blueprints right in the editor. Remember I mentioned that you should use both C++ and blueprints in your projects? Well, let's discuss that in more detail. It might be very tempting to use blueprints for everything, as you can actually make an entire game solely with them. However, even though you can build blueprints over C++, you can't really do the opposite. So if at some point you decide to optimize your game and convert some of it to C++, you will be screwed, as it will suddenly require you to change like half of your blueprints. To avoid this time bump, you should always have the definitions of your objects in C++, and then you can implement the logic in blueprints if you so desire. By doing this way, you can easily add C++ at any moment without having to refactor your whole project. And as a bonus, this will also allow you to slowly learn C++ as you might implement simple functions there. Over time, you might actually find coding in C++ being much faster than editing blueprints, as even though code can definitely get messy, blueprints are notorious for becoming an absolute mess as they grow in size. By the way, to avoid having your blueprints or C++ classes growing too much, I highly recommend that you familiarize yourself with object-oriented programming. This is not only applicable to C++, but also to blueprints and can help you to organize the functionality of your objects, which would help tremendously long term. While you're at it, it might also be a good idea to look at some other patterns in software design, such as events and interfaces, as they're very common in game dev. Finally, I want to mention the subject of optimizing your game. This part is a lot less fun than making new stuff, but at the same time, it's one of the core topics in game dev. I highly recommend using Git to monitor how your performance changes over time, and if you see a sudden drop in FPS, even if it doesn't affect the gameplay too much, try to improve. It's very likely that at some point you will need to do it anyway, and you do not want to spend a whole month just optimizing because your fancy game looks like a PowerPoint slideshow.